Backpacking tents fall into two categories: freestanding and non-freestanding. The ideal tent design for your trip depends on the climate, the type of ground you're camping on, how often you plan to use it, personal preference, and more. This video outlines the pros and cons of freestanding vs non-freestanding tents to help you decide which is best for your style of camping. Freestanding tents hold their shape without needing to be staked out or tied to anything for support. They can be picked up and moved around without collapsing on themselves. Freestanding tents get their structure from the included tent pole. Non-freestanding tents need to be staked out in order to maintain their shape. This means they cannot be picked up and moved around after they are pitched. Without the stakes, the tent will collapse. Non-freestanding tents get their structure from stakes, tension guidelines, and a pole. Freestanding tents give you more campsite options than non-freestanding tents. You don't need soft ground to pound stakes into or trees to attach guy lines to. A freestanding tent can be pitched on a wooden tent platform, deck, concrete parking lot, inside a backwoods shelter, or on a solid rock surface. This gives you more potential campsites to choose from. You can move a freestanding tent while it's pitched. Freestanding tents don't need to be staked out to stay pitched. If, after pitching your tent, you feel a rock or root in the middle of your back, you can simply pick the tent up and move it to a better, flatter spot. Freestanding tents set up faster. With a freestanding tent, you don't have to spend as much time selecting a campsite or thinking about where your guy lines or stakes will go. The tent pitches exactly the same every time. You don't have to strategize or plan in order to get a good pitch. Easier to clean. You can simply pick up your freestanding tent while it's pitched and shake it out. This is the easiest way to remove sand, dirt, bugs, and any other debris that accumulated inside while you were camping. Heavier freestanding tents have poles which add weight. They also usually have two walls. This requires more material which adds more weight. On average, an ultralight one-person freestanding tent weighs about 2.5 pounds. Bulkier freestanding tents have long poles. They can only collapse so far, usually around 18-22 inches, around 45-55 cm. This is the minimum length of your pack tent. Freestanding tents are also usually double wall. This adds material which adds bulk. When rolled up, the tent might measure 4-7 inches, 10-18 cm in diameter. Freestanding tents often perform worse in windy conditions due to the tall design of some freestanding tents. They tend to act like a sail in the wind. If your tent isn't properly staked down, it could blow away. You need to make sure that your tent is securely attached to the ground. You still need to stake out freestanding tents. You aren't getting away from the hassle of staking out your tent and adjusting guy lines by choosing a freestanding model. Even though freestanding tents can stand on their own, you still need to stake them out in most cases. If your tent isn't staked out, it can blow away in a light wind, even if your gear is inside. More fragile. The weak spot of freestanding tents is the poles. Aluminum or fiberglass tent poles are designed to be as light as possible. The material is thin and the poles must be flexible. If you bend them too far, they can crack or bend. Non-freestanding tents use trekking poles to pitch. These are much more robust. Lighter. The main reason to choose a non-freestanding tent is the weight savings. Modern ultralight non-freestanding tents can weigh as little as 1 lb for us, about 570 grams. Ultralight freestanding tents weigh around 2 lb 6 Oz, about 1,077 grams. The non-freestanding tent weighs over 1 pound less. More compact because most non-freestanding tents are single wall. They have much less material. They also don't have any poles. For these reasons, they pack down much smaller. You can even compress some models in a stuffed sack. I would estimate that you'll save 1-2 liters of space in your pack by choosing a non-freestanding tent. Easier to find replacement poles. Non-freestanding tents don't require a specific tent pole. If you lose or break your tent poles, you can find replacements at almost any sporting goods store, even in small towns or in the developing world. You can pitch your non-freestanding tent without a pole. There are a number of ways to achieve this. The easiest is to find a couple of sticks, break them off at the correct length, and use them as poles. Some non-freestanding tents have loops on the top that allow you to tie guy lines to nearby trees to hold the roof up. Non-freestanding tents are less versatile. You can't pitch a non-freestanding tent in as many places as a freestanding tent. The tent needs to be attached to the ground, or it will collapse. This means you need soft ground that you can pound stakes into. If the stakes pop out, your non-freestanding tent can collapse on some types of ground, Stakes just don't hold well. This is often the case when the ground is very dry or sandy. If a couple of stakes come loose in the night, your tent can fall down. Condensation is a bigger problem in some non-freestanding tents. Most non-freestanding tents are single wall. These tend to suffer from condensation issues. Moisture from your breath and the environment build up in the tent. Non-freestanding tents are less sturdy. Non-freestanding tents rely on the stakes to keep them standing. This makes them less structurally stable. They might not be able to handle as heavy of snow load or withstand as strong of winds as a freestanding tent. You have to stake them out in order to use a non-freestanding tent. It must be attached to the ground. This involves pounding stakes or securing guy lines with rocks. Hard to move if you chose a poor campsite. If, after laying down, you realize that you pitch your tent on top of a root or big rock, you'll probably want to move it. This involves tearing the whole tent down and pitching it again in a different location. Your shelter is one of your most important pieces of gear. After all, it's what protects you from the rain and wind as well as insects and other critters. It's important to choose a tent that will keep you dry and comfortable in a wide range of conditions. The choice between freestanding and non-freestanding tents mostly comes down to weight. If you're an ultralight hiker who is looking for the lightest possible tent, you'll prefer a non-freestanding design, particularly if you plan to carry trekking poles. We are going to end this video right away. If you have any query or information to share, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.